So today we're going to look at the concept of percent proportion. Now, we've talked about proportions before. A proportion is any time you have two equivalent ratios. So if you have 3 to 4 and you have 6 to 8, that's a proportion because 3 to 4, even though it looks different, it has the same value as 6 to 8. So a proportion is when you have two equal ratios. We can use proportions to solve problems because if we're given 3 of the parts, if they give us 3 of the pieces, we can find the missing 4th piece. Let's just do a quick example. Let's say I told you that I had the ratio to 2/3 and it was equal to a ratio of something to 12. And I asked you to find out what that was. Well, you could go ahead and say, I know 3 times 4 makes 12, so this has got to be 2 times 4. That's going to be 8. Or you could do cross products. I know that 2 times 12 is 24. Here's the cross products way. I know that 2 times 12 is 24. What would I have to multiply 3 by to get 24? Yep, that would have to be the 8. So we can use proportions then to solve some percent problems. Let's go down and look at this real world link. Monster trucks. Write the ratio of the total tire weight to the total weight as a fraction. Tires to total. So they tell you the tires on a monster truck weigh 2 tons. The entire weight of the truck is 6 tons. So 2 tons to 6 tons. Now we can represent that ratio as one of these fraction bars. So here's the whole thing. Here's the whole 6 tons. And here's the tire part. Here's the part that's just the tires. So we have a couple different ways of looking at this. So write this fraction as a decimal to the nearest hundredth. Well, we've got the fraction 2/6, and 2 goes into 6. 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes 6 3 times. So that decimal, the decimal for 1/3 is 0.3. It's actually, if you wanted to be perfectly accurate, it's 0.3 repeating. What about a percent? What percent is that? Well, 0.33 repeating, this repeating, is 33 1/3%. And that's one of the percents that you really want to learn. The percent for 1/3 is 33 1/3. The percent for 2/3, that's another one you want to learn. That's 66 2/3%. Those come up a lot in everyday stuff. So those are definitely ones to learn. All right, let's look at the next page. So this is an important table, and you should really keep track of this table. It talks about the 3 things that we're going to do. We're going to either find percents, we're going to find parts, or we're going to find wholes. Here's an example of finding percents. What percent of 5 is 4? So 4 is how much of 5? Finding parts, what number is 80% of 5? So you've got a number, and you're asking yourself, okay, I know what the whole is. The whole is 5, and I know I need 80%. Let's say you're taking a test, and the teacher says there are 5 points possible on this test, and you say, I want to get a grade of at least 80%. What score would you need out of the 5? And then lastly, 4 is 80% of what number? Let's say the teacher said you need 80% on a test, and you know you got 4 points. How many points possible could there be for you to get 80% on that test? So you'll notice, here's how we lay out those parts. Here's how we lay out the different pieces that we have in terms of parts, percents, and wholes. And you can see we've got 2 sections. So part and whole. So this whole top row are the parts. This whole bottom row are the wholes. This section right here are the numbers. So that's where you're going to have like the 4 and the 5. And this section here are the percents. So anytime you're looking at a percent proportion, you know the top are all the parts, the bottom are all the wholes, the left are the numbers, and the right are the percents. So what percent of 15 is 91? So we're going to go through and we're going to identify. Let's draw this again. Let's go back up here for just a minute. And let's label these. Go ahead, put this, and I want you to write part, whole, percent, and we can go ahead, if I can get my brain to work here properly, we can go ahead and do this with a percent sign, and whole. Oops, and 100, excuse me. That's the thing about this section. This section is always 100. Because you know, if you have the whole percent, you always have 100%. So that one never changes. In fact, let's just dress that up in a different color so we know that never changes. So in each problem, we're going to identify these 3 things. So when I go down to this first problem, this first example, we're going to use it to practice this. I'm going to write down part, whole, percent. And I'm going to identify what's being asked for. So here it says, what percent of 15 is? So we know then that that part, or excuse me, that percent is the x value. It's the unknown. You might see it as x, you might see it as n. They happen to do it as n here. It doesn't matter which variable you use. Heck, use the first initial of your own name. The part, what percent of 15 is 9? 9 is the part and 15 is the whole. So for each problem, let's identify these. So then they go through, once they've done that, then they solve it just like we were solving proportions last chapter. See, that's the great thing about doing this. You're not learning brand new math. You're not learning everything new. You're learning a new piece to add to what you've already done. If you can keep that idea in mind, if you can not be overwhelmed and think, oh man, here's another new, totally new thing I have to learn. That's not at all what's happening. What's happening is you're learning an add-on. You've got this base knowledge, how to solve proportions, and now you're using that base knowledge for a new skill. You're using it to solve for missing percent parts. Okay, so here's a got it problem. What percent of 25 is 20? So here's what we're going to do first. We're going to do this, and then you're going to practice it. You're going to turn off the video, and you're going to solve this problem. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify part, whole, and percent. So let's do this one, and then I'm going to let you solve it. What percent, okay, we know that's the unknown. We'll call it n this time. Of 25 is 20. What piece, what part of 25 is 20? What part of 25 is 20? So 20 is the part, 25 is the whole. All right, so go ahead. Pause the video, put that one into the percent proportion and solve it, and then come back and we'll check your work. Okay, we're ready to check our work, and you can see I've already drawn my proportion out. I've got my 2 fraction lines, and I'm ready to stick in the pieces. So the 20 was the part, it goes here. The 25 was the whole. The unknown was the percent, and the thing that never changes, the 100. We always have 100%. So a couple of ways we could solve this. We could solve this by doing cross products. We could multiply 25 times n, and we could multiply 20 times 100. If we do that, let's go ahead. I'm going to do that work right up here. I've got 20 times 100. This is A I'm doing. And that equals 25 times n. Well, 20 times 100 is 2,000. and that equals 25n. I'm going to divide by the coefficient 25. So I divide each of those by 25. 25n divided by 25 is just n. It's just n because that is a 1, so 1 times n is n. And 2,000 divided by 25 is 80. So 80 is my answer to this problem. Now, there's a second way to do it. Depending on what class you're in, you might have heard this called the Loomis method or the Alexis method, the Ferguson method. The second way that you can solve this is you can say, let me get rid of that and get rid of that so it's not confusing us. The second way is you can say, okay, I know that 25 times 4 makes 100. How much is 20 times 4? Because I have to do, if it's going to stay equal, I have to do the same thing to both sides. And 20 times 4 does make 80. N is equal to 80. Okay, go ahead, do B, and you're going to start B the very same way. Let's do B right here. Here's problem B. You're going to identify the part, the whole, and the percent. You're going to label each of those from problem B. So go ahead and do that, and then solve it. Turn the video back on, and we'll go over it together. Okay, so in this problem, you should have identified that the part 12.75 is what percent, or what piece, or what part of 50. So 12.75 is the part. 50 is the whole, and the unknown is n. So we'll use the cross multiplication method to solve this. So step 1, put down those. Step 2, fill them in with the things that you just figured out. Here's where the part goes. Here's where the whole goes every single time. Here's where the percent goes, and this is always 100. So we're going to have 12.75 times 100 is equal to 50 times n. Let's get our calculator out. You should have a calculator when you work these. 12.75 times 100. I bet a bunch of you realized, hey, you just moved that decimal point twice. Yes, you do. So we have 1,275 equals 50n. We're going to divide by the coefficient, divide by the 50. And when we take, it's already in our calculator, 1,275 divided by 50, we get 25.5. 25.5 is the value of n. Now, this is one you also could have done using the second method, which would be you'd multiply that by 2. And so if you multiply 12.75 times 2, 12.75 times 2, you get, oops, what happened? Oh, it multiplied by 0 for some reason. 12.75 times 2, you get that 25.5 again. So multiply both sides by 2, and you're still going to get n equals 25.5. So that's the method of finding a missing percent. So what if you're missing some other part of it? Well, let's take a look at the next page because I'll bet they're going to tell us. Okay, so this next section, they ask us what number is 40% of 120. Anytime you see something like that, when they say what number, they're saying what part. So what number is 40%? There's a piece, there's a section. So again, if you were to do your part, whole, and percent on this example, the part would be the n. The part is unknown. The percent we know it's 40%. The whole we know, the entire amount we know is 120. And so notice how they put them. The part, the whole, the percent. All right, let's do some more practice. And again, you know what? This is something you're going to get good at by practicing it. So let's do problem C. And the first thing I'd like you to do in problem C is I'd like you to identify the part, the whole, and the percent, and then go ahead and solve problem C. Okay, I'm going to pause the video, or you're going to pause the video, I should say, while you solve problem C. Okay, we're back and we're ready to solve C. So what number is 5% of 60? Well, this is the part, the what number. This is the whole, the 60. And of course, the 5% is the percent. So 5%, 60, the unknown. They call it P for part. So let's build our proportion. We know that's 100. That never changes. This time, the part is the unknown. The percent is 5. And the whole is 60. So we're going to have 60 times 5. 60 times 5 is equal to P times 100, or 100 times P. 60 times 5 is going to be, well, 6 times 5 is 30. So 60 times 5 is 300, is equal to 100p. We're going to divide by the coefficient. Divide by the coefficient. And 300 divided by 100 is 3. 100p divided by 100 is just p. So our answer to this one, what number is 5% of 60? That number is 3. Okay, go ahead, do part D, and then come back and we'll go over it together. Okay, I put my C work out of the way there, so I have room to do part D. So let's do part D right here. 12% of 85 is what number? Part, whole, percent. There we go. And we're going to fill all of that into our percent proportion. So in this case, 12% of 85 of the whole thing is what number, is what part. So part, 85, 12, and of course, that's always 100. So we have 85 times 12 equals the 100 times P. 85 times 12, you should have had 1020 equals 100p. You're going to divide both of those by 100. That's the coefficient. And when you divide 1020 by 100, you're moving the decimal place over twice, which means you get 10.2. So we know that 10.2 is the value of P. 10.2 is our answer for that one. That should have been your answer. So if you need to, pause the video. If you didn't get 10.2, pause the video, check your work so that you feel confident moving forward, because we're now going to go to the next section. What happens if you have to find the whole? All right, scroll on down here. Let's get rid of the calculator for just a moment. So you'll notice this is getting, this should be getting super comfortable now, because each time we're doing exactly the same thing. Each time we're identifying the part, the whole, and the percent, and then we're building a proportion to solve it. So 18 is 25% of what number? 18 is the part, obviously. It's the piece, it's the portion. So 18 is 25% of what number? Let's use W for whole. I stole that from them. Let's use W for whole. So now this time we're going to have 18 is the part. There's the whole, that's the unknown amount. 25 is the percent. And of course, it's always over 100. And then they go through and they solve that. they get 72. So you're ready to go ahead and do this on your own. Go ahead, do letter E. Let's put our work right here. Let's start our work right there. And your first step is to do the part, decide what the part is, decide what the whole is, decide what the percent is, and then put all of those things into that proportion and solve. Okay? Turn the video back on when you have a solution, when you know what W equals. All right, so in letter E, 40% of what number is 60? Well, they're pretty obvious what the percent is. It's the one with the percent sign, 40. Of what number? So 40 is a piece of something. It's a piece of some big amount, and its value, the piece of that big amount is 26. And there's W. So we have 26. The part over the unknown whole is 40% out of 100. We are going to do cross products. We're going to multiply 26 times 100, which is, by the way, 2,600. You just add those two zeros to that, 26. And 40 times W, or 40W. Now we divide by the coefficient 40. Divide by the coefficient 40. Let's grab our calculator. 2,600 divided by 40, and we get 65. So we know that in this case, the whole, 65 was the whole amount. Okay, do the same thing for letter F, and then come back and we'll discuss it together. Okay, I moved letter E out of the way. Let's go ahead and do letter F. So problem F right here. We have part, we have whole, part, whole, and we have percent. 84 is 75% of what number? So we know that the 84 is the part, it's the piece, it's 75% of it. The whole is the unknown. So again, we set up our proportion. 84 is the part, some unknown is the whole, 75% and 100. And then the process is the same, 84 times 100. And it's really nice when you multiply by 100 because you just take that and you add the two zeros. So 8,400 equals 75 times W, or 75W. Once again, divide by that coefficient, 75. And we have 8,400 divided by 75 is 112. 112 is how much the whole is. The entire amount was 112, and 75% of that amount was 84. Okay, I've jumped over to the next page now, and we're looking at this problem about a gorilla. They just set it up in a word problem. So they're, look over that example, and you can use that to see how all of this is put into a word problem. But I think the thing you really want to do at this point is you want to practice. So let's practice. So here are 3 guided practice problems. For each of them, the big step, and I think we've seen this now as we've gone through the problems. Once you get it laid out, let me just jump back a minute. And I want you to notice, here's how we did it when we were trying to find a part. And we used the very same, once we started working it, we used the very same method right here, very same method right there that we used when we were finding the whole. So the real challenging thing is to find what each of the pieces is. That's where the challenge is. Once you find them, then you're using the percent proportion to solve them. So for each of these, step number 1 is to figure out the part, the whole, the percent. Write that down for each of them. In fact, this is one of those things where it's identical each time. So I can just go ahead and I can say, wow, I've got that, and I'm gonna do that again, and I'm going to do that again. I'm just going to keep using the same formula, because in each problem, that's the first step. The first step is figure out what's the part, what's the whole, what's the percent, and then use the proportion to solve it. So go ahead, pause the video. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do 1, 2, and 3. You can do 1, 2, and 3 right now. You can just do 1 and then check your work and then pause again and do 2 and 3. Whatever works best for you. I'm going to have all 3 of them set up when you come back. So pause the video, start working some problems, and then come back. Okay, so we're back. So here's the answer to problem number 1. We identified that the percent was the missing thing, so I called that n. We had a part of 9 and a whole of 90. We ended up multiplying the 9 times the 100. We're cross-multiplying. 9 times 100, 90 times n. We had 900 equals 90n. We divided both sides by 90. And in this case, 10 was the value of n. So the answer was 10%. Now, if you need to pause the video and do number 2, go ahead and do that. I'm going to pull off the reveal here in just a moment for number 2. But if you haven't worked it out yet, please pause the video and work it first. It really doesn't do nearly as much good if you just watch me solve problems. You have to try to solve them yourself. Okay. All right, so hopefully you have solved number 2, because here comes the answer. And the winner is 0.7. So we had the part was the missing. What number? The part is the missing piece this time. So part over whole equals percent over 100. So we have 35 times 2, we're cross-multiplying, p times 100. 70 equals 100p. Divide both sides by 100, because that's the coefficient, and we get 0.7 is the value of the part. So 0.7 is 2% of 35. Okay, problem number 3, same thing. If you haven't solved it yet, do it yourself first. If you have solved it, you're ready for the reveal, so chance to pause. Okay, hopefully you're ready to go. And the winner is 68.5. 68.5 is the whole number. So 62 is 90.5% of 68.5. And again, process the same. Identify part, whole, and percent. Put them into our proportion. Do the cross multiplying. Divide by the coefficient. Get your answer. All right, so there you go. There's your lesson and review practice on percent proportions. So this, again, one of those places where if you have questions, you bring them to class. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in room B6.